This is Dates with Shin and Riri. Insert intro. Do, 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 do.
Alright, the purpose of this video.
Okay, alright, so I had a few questions in time for Valentine's Day. So it was Valentine's Day, like, what? It's gonna be a few weeks ago now. And I put up a question sticker to be like, hey, ask us anything. I didn't expect much from it, honestly, but we got some really great questions. So we thought we would just make a video out of it instead. Insert intro.
Again?
Kidding.
I'm gonna do an intro just in case that one doesn't work. It felt like these were some bigger questions that couldn't be answered just by typing out short lines on a text piece.
Yeah.
So we just thought it would be fun to have a conversation about it and then just share and invite you into how we speak to each other at home as much as we want the video to go well.
Fingers crossed.
All right, question 1.
Yes.
Was being touchy an issue for you both?
Not at all. No, it was not. It was. Yeah, it was. I remember like the first few months that we started dating, we're naturally quite affectionate people. And so we actually had to be sat down by my supervisor back then, and he was our pastor, and he's like, hey, you guys, we know that you love each other, but it's getting really uncomfortable. And it's not like we were like all over each other, but I guess we were just way too affectionate for the first few months of dating. And it made some people uncomfortable. So he had to talk to us. And so after that, we were like, oh, okay. We didn't realize that. And we just became a lot less touchy, less PDA.
In public. Or like in front of our friends. Because I think that was the first time I learned about sensitivity towards others who may not be in a relationship, who it might be a sore spot for or things like that. Mm-hmm. And you don't realize how you are in front of other people can also, as much as it's nice and you're just able to just freely share your love with one another, it's so easy to then forget that other people might be kind of just struggling through certain things, and that just triggers certain things. So that was the first time I was very aware of that. Yeah. And then, I mean, just even for us, it was kind of just like, oh, like even for our close friends around us, it's like they're happy for you, but it's okay. You don't need to be super in your face. And it's not like we were doing it to rub anything. It just happened to be how, you know, Rianne and I both express love through touch and a lot of just affection and affirmation, things like that. So sometimes it's just kind of calibrating depending on when there's people around, or, you know, for us, it's just in our private space, you know. So yeah, I think being touchy it could be an issue, but I wouldn't call it an issue. It's more just kind of just be sensitive to those around you and the timing of it all, because it might just be also, even then it was like early on in our relationship, right? So it's kind of like we're figuring out boundaries, you know, of how much is being able to express, you know, affection for one another while you're still getting to know each other and things like that. Yeah, I think that answers it. Nice. It's really warm.
It is. Is it because of the questions?
Because your arm is so hot. It's touching me.
Weird, bro.
Alright, number 2.
Well, that leads us to our next question. How did you set boundaries during the dating period and marriage? Wow. Oh man. Okay, so we started dating like how many years now? 6 years ago? 5 years ago. We got married in 2019. So we've been married for a year and a half. About a half, now. When we started, like we said, we were really physically affectionate and things like that. And so I remember, I think at one point we just had to sit down. Like it was as simple as having a conversation and being like, hey, like we want to honor each other, because this was our conviction, right? Like we felt that you want to honor each other in the dating process in terms of your bodies as well. So we didn't want to go too far, or far, physically. So I think at one point we did sign some sort of contract in a sense where we put down different pointers of we're not going to do this, we're going to make sure that we don't do this and that, and signed it.
I'm just listening to your sharing from someone who has zero context of who we are, what our beliefs and values are, and you're just you sign a contract. That's so weird.
All right, maybe you could copy and paste this.
I would set context first, but continue. Sorry,
so context of it.
No, you continue sharing.
You can say the context. We just felt in terms of our beliefs, we're both very strong believers of saving yourself.
Well, I can't say that because I screwed up in that area before, because I wasn't always a Christian.
That's true.
I think
we're gonna
understanding. Oh, why not? This is our life, right? How did you set? It's almost funny. It's how do you set boundaries during dating period and marriage? Your boundaries are dependent on your values.
That's true.
Right? So you can't just be we set boundaries, this is how you do it. This is our conviction, because for us, it's kind of, we see there's a holiness in being able to protect each other, and sex is reserved for the covenant of marriage, right? It's so it's kind of just for me, I wasn't always a Christian. I never really valued that same sort of sex. To me was just a fun thing to do. It wasn't more than anything. It's kind of just and marriage to me was a piece of paper. Yeah. And I think in that regard, on my journey of when I first encountered Jesus and I first got to know God, it's I started to get such a different perspective of what it means to honor one another, protect each other's hearts. And I think these things kind of fell into that, and that's why even for me it was the first time in relationship with you. It was I wanted to do these things well and to protect our boundary lines. So that's why we would, things especially when we're getting to know each other, it's kind of no spending time alone for long periods of time in isolated places, whether it's our house, whether it's so it's whenever Ryan came over, my dad was around. It wasn't
that's true,
just isolated and just open up to just kind of, it's tempting, you're kissing and you're hanging out, and then you're holding hands and we're already naturally physically touchy, so it's kind of it's very easy, especially if you're at least for me, it's kind of just oh man, I just, for the first time, I have to exercise a lot of self-control, and you've exercised self-control all your life in that sense. So
it's really interesting, because then even that was kind of my struggle in terms of realizing that saving yourself for marriage is no longer a real modern. It feels like you're such a prude, or there's several accusations that were going in my mind that even my doctor was asking. I tell him this, I didn't realize it was weird until my doctor was what? Are you serious? Why would you do that? And I'm let's just say religious reasons. But that
why would you
why would you save yourself? Why would you have never had sex? And not that I was ever perfect, and it was still a struggle in very different ways. But that was something that we actually had to deal with. Maybe this was a bit of a segue, where coming into our relationship, we actually had this talk even before we started dating, and when we started dating, I was oh yeah, I'm not bothered that you've never, that you've had sex before, and I'm I've just saved myself till marriage and stuff. And then I realized that deep within I was actually dealing with a lot of anger, feelings of injustice, of how can I, it's I've never thought to pray to God to be oh, I hope he's a virgin, A, that's weird. B, it's just I always thought, well, I've saved myself for marriage, so God knows that whoever I'm getting married to holds that conviction too. And then and then I had to really deal with that in my heart. And after that extensive period, I remember we were talking in Starbucks, and I just began crying with him, because I was I really feel all of this. You know, there was a lot of honesty there. But what I came out with realizing was, even for me, this is humbling to learn how do I extend grace? You know, how do I extend love? Because I'm not even perfect, you know, and how can we grow in love out of this? And we just began on that journey too. So it was really good. I know that, like we said earlier, I love what you said in terms of like, it really depends on different values. You know, we've had friends who were like, we're never going to kiss until we get married, you know, and we were like, yeah, that's not us. Yeah. But we just made sure kisses. We like kisses and that's okay with us. But for some people, that's their conviction, you know, and I think the important part is not to judge and condemn. And I've had to learn to walk with friends who, you know, even sex is not fully sex until marriage is not really a conviction, or like, well, that's not realistic. You know, I've had to learn how do I walk with people in grace where their values are so different from ours, you know, and especially coming from an environment, I think, where it was like, these are the values and everybody has to like adhere to them, but then you don't realize like, hey, like, we're human, we're imperfect, we have desires, we have needs, and I think that's really, really important even to acknowledge, you know. Yeah.
And I think it's also journeying on in a way that it's not about following these strict religious rules that have been set upon you, and that's why we're doing it. It's more, as you get to grow in your relationship with God, you start to realize these are things that have been placed to protect us and to also allow us to experience greater joy, greater freedom. And it's set us up really, really well for marriage. And I think that for us now, it's kind of like we have such security in our marriage, in the way that we trust one another, in the way that we relate to one another, because these things were things that we had difficult conversations over, addressed, not did it perfectly, but try to figure out kind of just when things would come up as to how we would address those things. But it's kind of like, and even in marriage, it's kind of like the biggest difference, I think, now, because the question's how did you set up boundaries during dating period in marriage? It's like boundaries in marriage is now, the way we see it, marriage is now we're one. There's a security in us being committed to one another that is a declared commitment. It's not. It's so different to dating, because when you're dating, you're like, yeah, I'm committed. Yeah, I love Rianne, and but then there's no, other than our words, there's no actual full-on commitment to that others can actually witness to say, hey, these guys chose each other. And so now the boundaries is, how do we protect this? It's setting boundaries outside, you know, it's like if anything steals time, energy, effort, capacity outside of our marriage, then that becomes the thing that can threaten to what's the word? I guess disrupt and distract from what's important in investing the love in our marriage for one another as well, and growing in that. So I think that's my only answer for setting boundaries in that way, because otherwise for us it's more just we figure out, like, I don't think I set boundaries against you in terms of
this is my space.
Well, for you, she set boundaries on me with Apex is now her game and Warzone is growing to be my game.
I think that an important point to make is that boundaries isn't just exclusive to partners, you know, or like, oh, look at this attractive person, you know, and all that stuff. But it's actually like, it is that simple and usually overlooked thing as like, well, is work eating up to my marriage? Like, how can I build a strong marriage and a strong foundation if work takes up all my time, if other things take up my time, if gaming takes up our time?
We've had conversations.
And that's the thing, like, you always just, I think for us, we realize what works really well for us is having these conversations. And he's so much better at it, I would say, like, than me, because I'm so used to like suppressing a lot of those things, or just being like, it's okay, like, it doesn't bother me when it really does. So I think I've been learning and growing in that area for sure.
Yeah, and it's not also a matter of you get it, and then we deal with it, and then it's over, and then you move on. It's daily, it's weekly, it's monthly, and I mean, I even read books about how to have difficult conversations.
That's true, and he tells me about them.
You know, and but I mean, also like I sometimes tell, but it's also kind of
which is good.
it's kind of almost like it's a quiet attempt to coach how maybe we can both bring language to things that we otherwise don't know how to have conversations about. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I just try it without having a conversation. It works great. And sometimes I just do it poorly because just emotionally you're so kind of worked up by certain things. So there's layers. I think there's just layers and layers and layers of stuff. But that's the beauty of marriage, where you get to work at it every day.
Yeah.
And the only time that begins to suck is if one of you stops, or if both of you stop. You just start giving up, and it's just kind of like you settle for whatever.
Yeah. And I think this is especially possible because even, I guess, before we got married, we said divorce, like, we won't mention the D word. Like, that's not even an option. That's not
an idea. Don't even joke about it.
Yeah, like, don't even. And I think I've made that, not that, like, but alluding to that, and I was like, wait, that's not good, you know? And so you're kind of like, I feel like it really is like a battlefield, you know, where you are in the trenches together and you are really working hard for your marriage, you know? And I think, it's really good. I always say, like, when people ask us, like, how's marriage going? Or ask me how marriage is going, I'm like, it's hard, but it's good. Everything. Like, I've just realized there is a whole nother depth to what good actually means. And so, yeah.
That's good. All right, next question. Mm-hmm. Any advice for singles looking / praying for love?
Wow, this is I think it's a big question.
Yeah, we're no experts.
It's
not like, we have here tips.
If I remember from my single days, what really worked quite well was actually being able to hang out with not just other singles, but also married people, you know. Yes, like, you do have, like, I definitely felt like that struggle of, like, oh, I really want to be married and I want to be in a relationship because look at how happy they are. But actually, I loved being with, even, like, dating relationships, married people, like, people who have significant others, and just to hear, like, what are your experiences? What are your stories? And I would ask them all these questions, you know, and just to peer into, like, the good times and the bad times, and to every time that kind of envy comes up, to be like, for me, it was like prayer, just being like, Lord, like, I do, you know, want to have a significant other, but I want to give this to you, and just really surrender it. Help me, like, literally help me. I think it's still my prayer half the time, like, help me do this. But being with married or dating or engaged couples and seeing their experience, being able to learn from what they've learned. And then for me, it was like still literally pursuing my dreams. I think just doing what I love to do, like, exploring what are things that I can just achieve. Like, I'm a big, like, goal person. Like, I love achieving things, and so I felt like as a single person there was so much for me to do, for sure. And that just helped me kind of learn a lot more about myself, you know. And I think that's really, really important, is to get to know yourself, be able to heal. And so going through even my own issues, because I think somebody once told me, and I just believed it in faith, where it was like, well, marriage just magnifies your flaws, you know. And I always thought, like, okay, I'm going to believe that, and I'm just going to work on my heart, because and then now that I get married, I'm like, oh yeah, you're not kidding. Like, it is like a magnifying glass.
Also, you can't hide in marriage.
You can't hide.
So there's no point trying to look a certain way so that you can trick someone to start liking the version of yourself that you've created that you think the other person wants of you. And I think for me, it's just kind of, as you were sharing, all that to say is more just focus on yourself. Don't look to be in a relationship thinking that's going to fulfill you.
Yeah.
I think if at the end of the day, we're all created for relationships, before you even think, oh, I need a date, just be intentional about being a good friend to others. Build friendships, and especially if you're thinking about dating, build friendships with girls. And then as you get to...
girls and men, same gender.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Be in a group setting, be one-on-one, be intentional. If there's someone that you're particularly attracted to, don't try and beat the bush around it. Just be authentically you. And I think all of us have that underlying sort of spirit that guides us, that tells you, hey, you're being authentically yourself or you're being a fraud.
Yeah.
In a way, where if you're kind of like, being uncomfortable is part of the process, but you can't also go into a situation like, say, when we were getting to know each other, it's like, my intentionality was to pursue Rianne as a friend.
That's true.
Ultimately, whether she says yes to being my girlfriend or not was already separate from my idea of why I was going to get to know Rianne. Because at the end of the day, the way I saw it was, if she says no to being my girlfriend, I've made a new friend. That's awesome, right? And even for me, it's kind of just like, at that time, I was just like, I wasn't sure if you were interested in me as much as I would try and figure out in different ways. You have a really good
poker face.
Yeah, so now like Rianne has zero poker face, so it's very helpful for me as well. And then in terms of like praying for love, like without being over spiritual about it, it's more just like for me, the one prayer I had during that process was, God, help me be the best possible version for me, for my future wife. Because then that way, and it's kind of like you're no longer expecting someone else to fulfill you, you're just trusting that God can help you grow into be the best possible version of you. And for us, we're continuing to grow. It's not like, oh, we got it, we're married, and now we just give up on life and do whatever all day and game and whatever, right? Game. But yeah, and I would say just don't over spiritualize it. If you're interested in someone, hey, you want to grab a coffee? Yeah. Go meet for a coffee. Hey, you want to go for a hike? Hey, you want to just share in each other's interests? Don't be like, oh, my interest sucks, it's dumb or whatever. They won't like me for me. If they don't like you for you, forget it. That's not for you. Don't need to try and convince people to like you. If they like you for you, that's the person that you have the best shot with, I think. That's true.
Like, so 2 things. Be yourself, don't be weird. And coffee doesn't mean marriage. Was jealousy ever a factor? If not, how did you deal with it?
Was jealousy ever a factor?
It was. It was. We've had to deal with that. I think everyone probably deals with it. Yeah, have you seen this face? Like, especially without glasses? Even with glasses, you just... Of course I dealt with it. Wait, you dealt with jealousy with me too.
I'm never jealous. I have no emotions. Emotions are not a thing.
Especially when we were first dating. I think that, like, our first few months, first year for sure. When I was like, during my period of Facebook stalking, and I'm like, who are these girls with this
during my period
I'm sorry. Can I say her name? Who it is? Who you ended up being really good friends with? No, okay, never mind. This person. I don't know, it was just more me. Yeah, like, I think it came up. I mean, he's a model, you know, he's amazing as a person. So, of course, I'm just going to be like...
So nice.
Who? What? You know, I felt inferior in some ways, or be like, oh, he's such a catch, you know, and I was like, I didn't feel as attractive, you know. I think especially maybe when I started... Yeah, like, I genuinely felt like, you know, you must know a lot of models who are, like, hot, you know, and I'm just, like, chilling, like, the girl next door who just is super chill.
I like the girl next door.
Oh, thanks.
I married her.
When?
Yeah.
How about you? I don't know if
I think in pockets. I think in pockets, I'm sure. Because jealousy can happen in so many different forms. It's not just kind of like, oh, with someone. Like it can be, it's usually something that starts in your own mind where you create a picture about something that isn't even happening. You know, like I think we've had arguments of how dream versions of ourselves.
Oh, they're like the biggest bubbles.
had disappointed the other, and we're like, I'm sorry. Stupid dream shin, ruining everything.
Stupid dream reread.
But yeah, I think more so early on. I think it because you don't know each other yet.
That's true.
When you're beginning to get to know someone, it's easier to be jealous about tiny little things because you don't know the circumstances and the character of a person, the thoughts of people and their reasoning behind why they do certain things, and that can cause or stir up that emotion because it touches against, you know, like, I mean, jealousy is just basically another way of saying you're either hurt or you're angry about something. Right, like it comes out of a place of like injustice or a little bit, you know, just like, oh, I'm jealous because that person is receiving the attention that I feel like I deserve as her boyfriend, you know. And for me, when I was first getting to know Rianne, she had a lot of male friends who are all very great friends, even for both of us now.
Friends.
Like, but you know, I didn't fully understand the dynamics of why that was because she's growing up in an environment, and you know, you get to know each other's friends, and thankfully for us, like our circle of friends are fully aware of one another, you know. There's no sort of group of friends that are just hers or just mine. We've always been quite intentional about that, and that's been super helpful, I would say. I mean, you know, even it's not like we have deep friendships with every one of them, but it's kind of like, oh, there's an awareness there. You share how these people kind of fit into your life, and then the rest is like how intentionally you want to pursue it. Like even one of my best friends now, it's kind of like when Sam before he even came, it's just like, oh, there's this dude that we're talking to, we're interviewing for this job back when you were working at church. Okay. And it's like, oh, she's working with a guy. I was like, should I be jealous about that? And like, just like meeting up and this, and I'm like,
they're great. No.
Now it's just like, how can, like, that's the stupidest thought ever because it's just not even a real thought. I've just made a situation up in my head.
That's true. Like, and I think that's where you can get that's where you can get carried away, or make sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Make sure that even those things, it's like sometimes it feels good to get carried away and be like, oh yeah, like, and you just make up this whole like drama in your head, you know. And I think it's safe to just even communicate it, you know. I remember there was a friend, and still good friends now, where that friend A was kind of weirdly trying to set me up with friend B, and then I told him about it. And then he was like, what the heck, you know? And I just thought, like, first it's kind of funny, but then obviously, like, nothing happened because I just went straight in and be like, actually, I'm, like, getting to know this other guy, and he's awesome, he's great, you know? And so... But thankfully we're all good friends, and nothing legit, like I didn't even like this guy, like there's no attraction, there was just nothing, but even openly communicating that, you know, and hopefully like it doesn't come from a place of like, look at me, I'm so desirable, you know, but it's just genuinely like, hey, this is what happened.
Hopefully it doesn't come.
Hopefully. I think there is always a chance, right? But I don't know, I've never really met anyone who's like that, so okay.
Well, I was also gonna say, how did you deal with it? I like what you said is talk about it.
Talk about it.
Like, hey, I was like maybe, and try and talk about it not from a place of blame, because it's easier to just blame people. It's like, hey, you did this thing.
You looked at that girl.
You know, you went out and then it's like you're not paying attention to me. But if you actually unpack the feeling of hurt or disappointment that you're experiencing in a certain situation, go, hey, when this thing happened, I felt hurt, or like I felt a bit of jealousy come up. You know, I want to talk about it because I think that there's something there. And for us, we're quite, at least more so me, I feel like if you can have difficult conversations about smaller things, you don't have to wait for it to get really big until you're like, okay, we need to have a big conversation. It's like, have these small, difficult conversations about smaller things, because sometimes it might, for me, I have the tendency to maybe overdo it in a way where it's kind of like I'm having conversations about things that don't need to have conversations. So that's something I need to work on. But at the same time, I'd rather have the benefit of the doubt of going that way than leaving something sort of like dealt with. Yeah. And then just left to simmer, and then suddenly blows up in like a way that just doesn't make sense at the time.
And on the other side of that is I think like close male and female friendships,
Oh, that's the next question. What are some boundaries that you set with meeting up with others?
Because I guess with that too, it's like, there are stories where it's like, oh, he's just my friend, he's just my best friend, he's like my BFF, and then next thing you know, it's like something happens.
They're like closer.
They're like closer than comfortably, like you're just comfortable with. Yeah. So just make sure that these things don't happen. I think something that somebody had told me like years ago was like, essentially like men and women can't really be friends, and that like started this whole ruckus, and I totally believe
that's controversial. Probably.
Yeah, that's controversial.
Even to the person watching this.
Yeah, even to the person watching this. And honestly, like I wasn't like I agree and I disagree and all that stuff. I just like kind of thought about it, and I think there is some wisdom in terms of like I don't personally have like, oh, this is my male best friend, like we do everything together and things like that. I just like we have good male and female friends, but we make sure, again, that whole communication thing of like, hey, like I'm meeting with this person about work, or I'm meeting this person just to catch up, and sometimes we have one-on-one time with like either female, like the opposite gender.
Not so much
You, I think,
because sometimes you have to do it with work.
I have to do it with work, especially. And sometimes that work stuff is really catch up, but then I have the responsibility, or you have the responsibility, whichever, to be like, it really is just friendship, it's work, don't think about it, any weird stuff, and it doesn't come up anyway, but like you're human.
But if it does come up, I would like, for example, if I start feeling kind of weird about something, I'd just be like, hey, like this is how I feel when you do X, Y, and Z, or you're meeting up with whoever, and it's kind of just like, I think I would feel better if you don't meet, or if you don't talk, because I think even for me, it's like early on in our dating, it's kind of like I had just sort of resolved even relationships with my ex-girlfriends, and kind of just in this place where we talked about like our past stuff and had the opportunity to apologize to one another for past hurts, and it's like you're in a place where we can be actually genuinely no feelings, and wow, like I can say hi to you and not feel resentment, anger, and this, that, whatever. And if we wanted to, we could have continued talking, been friends, but I felt like I got to a place in sort of my walk where I feel like I don't think that's wise. Like it's not like if I see you, it's like hi, I can still talk and it won't be weird, but it's kind of like I'd rather not continue this like conversation as I was getting to know Rianne, because then that could then stir up unnecessary like points of hurt, and it's like if I'm really all about pursuing Rianne and getting to a place where we can be each other's best friend, then I wouldn't want to place someone else as more important than Marian, and vice versa, hopefully, right? So it's kind of like, but that journey starts in different places for different people. 100%. It's humbling that you have to realize that's a choice you have to make when you're pursuing someone. Because sometimes you'd be in situations, and I'm sure even in the past, I was that guy who was like, of course you can be friends with girls. Yeah, for sure. And then not realizing while you're dating and you're friends with all these other girls, and then, your girlfriend at the time can only express so much verbally. And then, it's kind of like if you haven't developed the ability to communicate well, then you kind of do the best that you can so that externally you guys are okay. And that's not a relationship. That's just, you're almost doing a relationship performance for other people. I don't mean to make past relationships sound bad, because they weren't. They were, everyone, that's good. Every relationship that you enter into, most of us enter it with at least with the full hope that it would be the best relationship, right? But you're growing through each one. So each one would have taught me at least these are things that I had completely overlooked as important, because I was more focused on how I felt, my own feelings, my own needs, and all this stuff. And when you're in a relationship, it's not about just you. And I think that's the thing that for us, thankfully,
and with that too, it's like and with that too, I think it's important to note that it's not a form of control. I know that, again, on the opposite side, blink twice. if there are, on the other, really on the very, on the other extreme of the spectrum, you could just be like, no hanging out with everybody, and and that's like a form of control. Yes, you have a responsibility to each other, and you have the right and again the responsibility to honor each other. But I would say that control does come from an unhealthy place, then I would say that's a whole nother, that's a whole different story, because I think it's healthy to have, friendships in you have different genders, you have different backgrounds, experiences, and things like that, and you just learn so much, and so I don't think that you should eliminate that completely. That's not what we're saying. But anyway.
Nice.
Good.
So did we answer that question? So what are some boundaries that you two set up with meeting
I think we talked about the...
I think we have this amazing ability to take your questions and answer a question that we want to answer.
Or a concept. I think conceptually, this is our principle, but I think practical ways that we set boundaries is, number one, tell each other.
This can also be read differently. What are some boundaries that you two set up with meeting other people?
But I think it just means opposite genders and things like that.
That's assumptions are dangerous, guys.
I think so. I gotta remember. Okay, so
no, I'm just kidding.
Practically speaking, I think number one, talk about it. Tell your significant other, hey, I'm gonna do this, and be accountable. Be transparent about it. Don't be weird. The moment you start being weird, there's something wrong.
If you feel like you gotta hide something in what you're sharing, that's probably a good indication that you need to talk about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Number two.
Follow number one.
Time. I think setting a time is good. You're not going to talk for 4 or 5 hours.
Oh yeah, make sure you're both
1, 2, 3
at that headspace to have these conversations. Don't just ambush each other during the day. Hey, we're gonna talk about this, because that's how the fight about the fight happens, and then at the end of the day, you're now no longer fighting about this thing that really started it.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we can move on.
Yes.
All right. Finally, what has been some of the biggest challenges during marriage?
Each other. It's true. I'm a big challenge to you. You're a big challenge to me. It's because you're learning how to live with each other. That's what it is. But in terms of the detail of that,
I thought it was perfect.
Sorry to burst your bubble, buddy.
It's okay. Continue.
Communication. I think communicating when everything is great is obviously not a problem, but when it's hard, emotions are high, or things are being triggered, then that's really difficult. I think especially for me, I have a very hard time really communicating what I need, what I would like, and how I would like him to not necessarily change, but it's hey, can you stop when you do this is how I feel. That is actually really hard for me to do. I think that's a little bit easier for you. But his challenge is probably also that it's because I react that way, it makes him feel what's the point, bro?
My biggest challenge is wanting to have conversations, but the way I ask questions trigger hurt in Rianne, so we no longer can have the conversation about the thing that hurt me, but the thing that hurt me now hurts her because I was bringing it up. And it becomes a weird lose-lose situation. But we work through it. We don't just stop, because I think then it's easy for me to just be so sad that it's like, oh, now I've hurt you by bringing up the thing that I felt like you hurt me by. And it's not like huge things, but it's kind of like little things can come up because we're human. It's not like, and we don't have everything 100% down, but this is just more sharing what we go through.
Because it's not like I want him to be like, well, shut up now. I think that's how you have like super passive guys sometimes, where it's like, okay, fine, I won't say anything. Then you retreat into a cave. But actually,
there's a reason for that, though. Like that happens because there's past experience of you're trying to express something, and you've been shut down multiply. So it's kind of like your voice doesn't matter. And I feel like that's where it's kind of like we've had a long enough period of getting to know each other and dating, understanding each other's communication styles, knowing that we mean well, and just at times it's kind of like if it doesn't work out, then I feel like only now in marriage we now no longer have breaks from each other. Like you can't just go home at the end of the day if something's hurt you. You're living together, so you either go to bed angry, which sucks. No, don't recommend it.
100% no.
Or you deal with it by giving each other the space time that you need. What I feel like has been helpful is saying, okay, you don't have capacity. I know sometimes Rianne, if she reacts a certain way to something that I've brought up, she'll need a bit of time to get back to a headspace to then have the conversation. And when I don't respect that time, it becomes worse. It becomes worse. And then, the rest is just adjusting to each other's living habits, working habits. The biggest and first thing that really bothered me was the number of times the shower drain would be blocked with huge clunks of hair. I did not know girls shed so much hair. I'm surprised that she still has hair on her head.
I hope it's just that. I'm not balding.
Be a hot bald lady.
Yes. Let's pray that doesn't happen though. But yeah.
Shine your head.
No. No. Okay.
Yeah. Anything else to add? What?
Okay. How long did you date before you were official? We should probably tell our story.
Do we need to? It's okay. Just
not now. It's just a lot.
Don't worry.
We dated for.
Where's that question?
Number 3.
Oh, I skipped that. My bad.
4.
That was gonna be such a good wrap up to the video.
Okay,
how long did we date before we were official? 3.5 months. The end.
Oh yeah, 3.5 months. Yes. We started getting to know each other April.
About a month and a half in, I was clear about my intention that I was interested in Rianne.
Yes.
Which is very weird for me to verbalize because in the past, my past relationships had been just like, oh, it's obvious we like each other, right? Oh yeah, we're dating, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to put a label to it, right? We're just boyfriend and girlfriend magically, right? It's just kind of like, no, that's confusing.
It's confusing. Confusing.
But for us, it was like, I was being very intentional about pursuing Rianne as a friend, and I think that's where the whole big picture of our story, which will be told at another time, will make it make a lot more sense. But
thank you for watching.
Thanks for the questions. Hope this is helpful and at the very least entertaining for you guys who know us. If you don't know us,
I'm sorry.
Get to know us by watching more videos. Follow Marian Philisilda on Instagram.
Kawasaki.
She spoke over. Did you see that? She spoke over me. Didn't get to finish.
I am very excited. So yes, follow Shin Kawasaki as well.
Like and subscribe. And if you want to see more dates with Shin and Riri,
let us know.
We'll do more. If not, we'll stay in our lane. And
cue outro. What's your outro?
Walk off set.